Welcome to the Create the Life You Want podcast, where we break down the journey of people just like you going from dream to ownership, business acquisitions, franchises, and startups. I'm your host, Jeremy Ames. Today's episode is brought to you ad-free by Guidant Financial. Guidant is America's leading company helping aspiring entrepreneurs use retirement funds to buy or start businesses. If you're committed to buying or starting a business, you can find out more about your funding options by going to www.guidantfinancial.com. That's Guidant financial.com. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Create the Life You Want podcast. Today, I am joined by Patrick Broderick. And Patrick has an interesting story. He is someone who had a career that he was in for almost 30 years, doing something, working for another person, and then decided, hey, why don't I do this for myself? And so we're going to hear a little bit about Patrick's story and how he made that jump, how he created his own brewery, and then where that's taken him over the last handful of years. So Patrick, thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what your life looked like for 30 years? Because you've been doing this for a long time, but not necessarily for yourself.
Yeah, no, it was a full 30. It was 30 years in a week.
30 years in a week. Wow.
But yeah, I had just a really good, solid background in brewing. I make beer. I was studying microbiology at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Graduated in '92. Started home brewing towards the end of my my career, that my time there at San Luis Obispo. Because of the microbiology, it really stuck, and I really understood it in a way that made it really interesting to me. So I decided to pursue a career in brewing. Saturated the market with resumes. Ended up down in LA at Anheuser-Busch right out of college because they paid a lot of money. But it really wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted to make craft beer. So I was only there for 3 months and then ended up accepting an offer that I had received earlier in the year from Mark Riedrich at North Coast Brewing Company in Fort Bragg, California, which is really the opposite of Los Angeles. And so it really appealed to me. And I ended up staying for a long time. It was a 6-month internship, and I ended up being there 30 years. During the time I was there, I did some correspondence studies at UC Davis, so it really solidified the science background of brewing. And so I went along for about 9 years into it. I ended up leaving North Coast, going to Moab, starting a brewery in Moab, Utah, and then once again got a little homesick. Came back. My boss at North Coast rehired me, so I finished my career there as brewmaster of North Coast Brewing Company. So that's sort of the basis of my background. If that's
Yeah.
what your
And
was.
at what point did you know, Patrick, that you wanted to at one point go out on your own? Like, when did that happen in this 30-year arc?
Towards the end of my time at North Coast, I just started to feel like, I'm 50. I was 56 years old, and I always wanted to have my own brewery, and I had a lot of these ideas in my head about how it could be done and how efficiently it could be done. And I just knew the process in a really in-depth way. So I knew I could do it. It was just a matter of doing it, deciding to do it, and a couple things happened that sort of made me want to pursue it. And so that I said, "What the heck?" And I gave it a try.
What were the things that sort of pushed you over the edge and said, now's the time?
Yeah, I don't really want to get into a lot of that. It was
Okay.
just, it was just time. I had been there for 30 years, and it was just, I'm just going to leave it at that. It was time for me to move on.
Yeah. It sounds like you were seeing opportunities to innovate, but maybe didn't feel like you had the freedom to do the things that you thought made
Oh
sense.
yeah, I mean that for sure, for sure. I guess that's a safe way of saying that. Yeah, there were a lot of things that I wanted to do, that I thought should be done, and there was just some. I'll just say there's some differences in opinion of the way we approached things there, and I wanted. You're right. I wanted to do it my way, and I didn't want to ask anyone if I can do something, because I was very confident in what I wanted to do. So yeah, I wanted to be my own boss.
Yeah, and so your story is somewhat unique in that you have this depth of expertise in a very specific thing, and you're moving over to start a business within that. So, walk us through what you did. 'Cause clearly, you had knowledge about how to do the brewing, but where were you kind of fumbling around trying to figure it out?
Well, I'm not a businessman. I've always been I was really a brewing scientist and a brewer, and I was a supervisor of a lot of people. But that's not, you run some aspects of the business, but I'm not a businessman. So you know, um, I started by getting a book, how to start a brewery. I read about things when I want to learn.
Yeah.
I got an accounting book, accounting for dummies. I got a couple different accounting. Textbooks and read through them and started to get the general idea of how that aspect of the business would work. I have a brother-in-law who's in business. He was really my financial backer and also directed me and guided me through the process of starting a business. He directed me to write a business plan, which I did, and it was a really solid plan. And I want to say that it really is. Looking back on it, it's all been true. Everything that I stated in that business plan has come to fruition so far. I also like spreadsheets, so I made a spreadsheet that basically showed the revenue that we should expect based upon a lot of factors. I used the size of the space I had. I used the hours of operation we'd be open, how many, how much we'd charge for a beer, and all these things. And I made it basically made a revenue calculator that showed really the very big margins that draft beer have over other forms of package, such as kegs or or bottles or cans. It's about at least three times the margin. So I wanted to focus on that, and that was a big part of my resume. And it also showed that the Excel spreadsheet really showed some serious money that you could make doing this. And so that's where I started. And then from there, I distributed the resume, and I'm sorry, the business plan to and got some investors. Mostly, really started with just family members, but it did show that I was very serious about it, and they can look at it and they can ask me questions, and it's pretty straightforward once I got finished with it. And that's really how I started.
Yeah. So in your business plan, one of the core parts of a business plan is sort of identifying what's your, unique sales and marketing strategy. What hole are you going to fill in the market? You've been in the industry for 30 years. So what was the opportunity that you saw?
Well, Fort Bragg is a very unique place. It's a small town right on the coast, Pacific coast. So it's a tourist-driven town. It used to be lumber and fishing, and that's all gone away. Now it's all pretty much all tourism now. It's unique because it's not someplace you would go. Pass through to go to somewhere else. You come here for a reason, usually for vacationing, and because of that, I saw that there's quite a bit of money that comes in on a regular basis from other areas, and there are people who are looking. And I did some research um, on about wine tasting and beer tasting, what percentage of people come to the coast to do that. And I was able to show that we're going to have a really big revenue flow from tourism. This town doesn't have a whole lot of things to do. There's two other breweries here, one of them the one I just left, and they were very different business models than what I have. I have a Taproom brewery, and North Coast Brewing Company is a production brewery. The other brewery in town is a brew pub, so we're all a little bit different. And so I wanted to focus on the taproom aspect of that, and that was a big part of my business plan, showing that the tourist money from tourism is going to be huge. What I didn't know was that the locals would also really love it, and so because of where we are, the locals really flood into my place on a regular basis and got me through the winter. So.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about the differentiation there because you said one of the breweries was a production brewery, meaning they're
Uh-huh.
just bottling stuff to send out. The other
Uh-huh.
one was a pub, so it's more like you come in and you eat and have something to drink.
Right.
What's different about this tap house concept and what was
Yeah.
your hypothesis about why people were going to want to come in?
Yeah, a taproom brewery is a sort of a newer model of brew pub sort of. The difference between a brew pub and a tap room is that a tap room doesn't. The majority of the beer that's produced is there for in-house consumption. It's not to say you can't do it the other way too, but it's the majority of it is. And also, food production is either zero or very limited, and we are very limited. I wanted to stay away from food production because of the cost, the high cost of food production, all the
Yep.
capital expense of all the equipment. The staffing is much more challenging. And I wanted to focus on the high margins of beer. So that's why I chose a tap room. And North Coast Brewing Company, they sell truckloads of pallets of beer, and that's how they make their money. So it's a completely different business model. The only thing that's the same about the two is we both sell beer, but we sell different forms of it.
Yeah.
So that was why a tap room. I learned about tap rooms maybe 5, 6 years ago. I went to one in Alameda, and I was just astounded that you can go in there and bring your own food. And I thought, well, wow! And there was a big line it was Faction Brewing in Alameda. It was a big line to get to a beer. We waited in line for 20 minutes. And everyone was having a good time, and those taps were just boom, 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 boom. And I just right away went, wow, that's a lot. I want to do this. That was sort of when I had the genesis of the idea, when I knew that it was possible.
Well, in a tap room sounds like it might give you a little more freedom of creativity because you've got to be switching out and experimenting with different kinds of beer all the time, right? You're not doing production beer of something that's already been
Exactly.
branded and
Mhm. And that's a was a big draw for me. And all brewers want to be creative. All brewers want to be able to make their beer, their style, and say, "I made this." And I'm no different. I love create. It's an art form, and I love to make it. And yeah, taproom you can have a lot more fun with it. You don't have to be stuck with one brand. You don't have to buy a bunch of labels and packaging and get a sales team all geared up to sell this new package that's coming out. You just simply say, hey, you got a new beer coming out. It's gonna be out next week. You go on Instagram, you do a post on the new pale ale, and people come in and taste it. It's very simple. And it's fun. It's a lot more fun. Taproom space. I didn't really talk about that. The space itself is the reason my place is so popular. Is it's first of all, it's right downtown, downtown Fort Bragg, and it's a 7,000 square foot building. And with the taproom, you walk in, and you walk up and you order a beer, and you go sit down wherever you want. We got dartboards. We got live music, we have cornhole, we have there's all kind people come in and they meet friends, and I don't know if you've heard of a third place. My sister introduced this concept, but it's like a third place. It's like you have home, you have work, and then you have a place you go to hang out and get away, and that's what my place is. And I get people coming in constantly thanking me for opening it because they love it so much. And it's really that's really what differentiates this from like a brew pub. Whereas a brew pub, you go into North Coast, you're going to sit down and you're going to probably talk in a hushed voice because there's people around you, and it's you can't get up and walk around, and it's fine, but it's not a tap room. And a tap room is just much more fun and more community oriented than the other types of breweries.
yeah. Well, I have a little experience with breweries because I used to work for and run a brewery restaurant 1,000 years ago.
Okay.
They aren't cheap to set up when you think about all the equipment and stuff that you have to buy to do it if you're going to do it well. So I'm curious, what did it cost you when you look at a 7,000 square foot space and all the infrastructure you were going to need to do this well? Like, how did you think about that part of the business plan?
Yeah, you're feeding me some good questions. So I was very naive about what it would cost. I mean, they always say, "Oh, you always underestimate the time and the cost," and I did. I started with getting my dad and my uncle and my brother-in-law. We were the initial investors, and I quickly realized that once I got a designer involved, that geez, we need more money. And we did another capital raise, and a second and a third, and then about 3 weeks before we were to open, I ran out of money, it was a really panicky situation for me. And I had to go to all the contractors and let them know, hey, I'm out of money, I'm out of capital, but we have to finish so that I can pay you. And so most of them were pretty good about it. And I ended up, owing, I think it was about $300,000. Most of that I've paid off, or at least half of that's already paid off in the first year. So that's good. But what did it cost? It's probably going to end up costing about $1.3 million.
Yeah, all
um,
in.
to do it by the time we're done. And, because a lot of it was done with revenue, it only cost me about $1 million in capital to start it, and then
Yeah.
we paid the rest of it off as we've been going along. So I'm kind
How
of
did you
happy with
think of,
that.
yeah, how did you think about the staging of it? Because if you're going to be open, obviously beer is not something that gets brewed overnight. It's not like you decide,
Right.
hey, I want to have a new beer tomorrow, and then you've got
Yeah.
it on tap ready to rock. So how did you think about structuring your investment so that you would have inventory to deliver to
Yeah.
people when you're open?
Yeah, another really good question that inspires me to speak a lot. Once again, a little bit not really sure. I was kind of just, yeah, I sort of like being on a whitewater rafting where you're just sort of trying to control the thing and not capsize. You can't go back. You can't stop. You got to just keep navigating. Um, but Yeah, so there was a lot of complications. I had some complications with the I had a brand new equipment being manufactured by this company, Brewbuilt, and they were really late on getting the product to me, and I had to, it was like I was getting, we opened in July. I wanted to open earlier, and I'm telling them I need this equipment. I got my floors are all poured and everything. I need the equipment. I need to start brewing beer, and they couldn't do it, and they ended up giving me a small little system, a tiny little system to start brewing, so I'd have beer to open with. I didn't have any of the fermenters, and so I had bought a fleet of serving tanks. Um, I wasn't using kegs; I was using these 200-gallon serving tanks. So I used the serving tanks to ferment the initial beer in, and I would
Yeah.
just, as it got warm, I would move it into the cooler because the cooler was now functioning to control the temperature. And I just made it work. I was working. I've never worked that hard in my life. And But I got it done. I was able to just sort of fly by the seat of my pants, get it done, and was able to do it. But it definitely wasn't something that went smoothly.
Yeah, so you cobbled it together. That's like the brewmaster's form of bathroom brew,
I guess
brewing
so.
in the bathtub,
Yeah.
getting it ready to go. So you had to cobble together those pieces. How did you think about what you needed to have when you opened? I mean, did you kind of plan this stuff out? Did you have a spreadsheet that was laying out when you needed to do things and they were just behind schedule, or were you literally just, coming around the bend in the river raft going, okay, that's a
Yeah, I was
big rock
really,
I got to avoid.
I was really screwed in a lot of ways. Like they were, this company got Chinese manufactured tanks, and they got stuck in the port of Oakland. I couldn't get them out of the port of Oakland. They were charging me all this money to get it out. The company wasn't helping me get them, and so I remember just, being, I was stuck. I was the total impasse. I couldn't do anything, and really super frustrating and frightening. But like I said, I just sort of like I made it work. You know, I did plan. As far as what I needed to open, I knew that aspect of it. I knew what I needed. I just didn't have it. But once I had it, I knew what to do. And
Yeah.
I did have a designer that helped me with the. I didn't have to worry about the space itself. That was getting taken care of. So really, it was just about the brewing equipment being late that made it really, really challenging.
Yeah.
But I just think that probably any business that opens probably faces similar challenges, and you just got to kind of be ready for it. I did this all by myself. I didn't have any help. I didn't have like, it wasn't like four partners, each one of us with a different skill set. It was just me, and so I just had to make it work, and I did.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the funding of your business and the investors. So you decided you needed to raise about $1 million total. How did you think about where that $1 million was going to come from, and how did you structure it? Did you borrow it from people? Did you take it as an investment where you gave equity
Yeah.
in the company?
Yeah, I didn't want to borrow money too much. I used I rolled my 401k over using Guidant to roll that
Okay.
over. So I had some funds, and we went through that process, and and I was able to use those funds to start the business with the Rob's rollover. So that was how my initial investment
So
came
your
from.
retirement plan was one of the initial investors, and then
Yes.
how much of the $1 million came from the retirement plan versus these sort of external investors that you brought in?
I was about 350,000 from the retirement plan, and I also had
Okay.
about 50,000 of my own. So about 400,000 was mine, and about 350 was from the retirement plan. So about
Okay.
40% of the
So you got to
company.
get, 600K from investors. How did
Right.
you think about structuring that?
I had my brother-in-law help me a lot doing that. Like I said, initially I had him, my dad, and my uncle, and we had, I think, between that we had about 600, 700,000. I did get a loan through the city. It was a really good business grant loan that the city gave out that was trying to encourage employment. So I have to have a certain number of employees to, show that I would have a certain number of employees to get this loan. But it was a $210,000 loan at 1%. So
Oh,
that was
wow.
a big chunk, and I used that money to buy the equipment. And then from there, I did another stock offer, and I just went to, I tried to stick with friends and family and people that I knew. I didn't want to have people, I wanted this to be sort of loose, hey, this is me, you know me, this is what I'm doing, here's how I'm doing it. How would you like to do this? And we did a minimum $25,000 stock. I didn't want to have 50 investors, so
Yeah.
25,000 was the minimum, and most people did $25,000 investments. There was a few that did 50. And they were friends from college. They were friends from high school. There was a few people that were friends of friends that came to me, and that's kind of how I did it. I just we got them on board. Obviously I started a corporation to do this, and we sold stock.
Yeah.
And we did that about as we got to the end and needed more money, we got more investors. And so I think there was about three different money rate or capital
Yeah.
raises.
How did you figure out how to value the amount of stock that you were going to give to these investors for their dollars coming in?
How did I value it? I just, it basically it's just basically it's percentage. I don't really
Okay.
know.
So you just gave a straight percentage
Yeah,
ownership. You come in with
yeah.
10% of the
They bought
dollars.
shares. Shares were worth $10 a piece. I'm sorry, that was set up through
Sure.
guide. The shares would be $10 a piece. So that's how 25,000 shares got you what 2,500 shares.
Yeah.
$25,000, 2,500 shares.
I want to go back and talk about that 1% loan. How did you even find out about that
Yeah.
offering with the city?
Once again, another great question. I going through this, like I said, nope, not a business person. I was trying to do some research on Fort Bragg and tourism and how much money I can expect from the tourist trade going to visit California. And I stumbled across this website called West Business Development Center, which is based in Fort Bragg in the area here. And it was offering free business counseling services. And so I was like, whoa, geez, so I hooked up with them, and they were really good. And they helped me in a lot of ways, but one thing they did is they got me connected with like people from the city. And they introduced me. I was introduced to, or at least it was had a meeting to meet the city manager of Fort Bragg. His name was David Spar. Uh, Hardcore guy. It was really sort of an intense meeting. And then once he saw my spreadsheet, saw my resume, saw what I was trying to do, he suddenly became a big fan within about 20 minutes of the meeting. And now I had him in my corner, and he did a lot of things. Like they weren't even going to allow a brew pub downtown because it was manufacturing and that wasn't zoned for it. But they made an exception to allow me to do it because they saw that it would be great for our downtown area. So those connections I made were huge. And I just had made really good relationships with the folks at City Hall, which is right across the street from my brewery, and that really helped. To grease the wheel. They wanted me to succeed as much as I wanted to succeed, and so those connections, meeting people and making those connections became really important to my success.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce that, Patrick, because that's huge, especially when you're in the state of California, which is not
Yes,
known for light legislation when it comes to opening a new business, and especially a business where there's lots of codes that
right.
drive what you have to meet. So, what I'm hearing is you got connected to local development center. They connected you to the right people at the city, and that led to this really low interest loan that you can get. It led to some changes in zoning to support your business, and a lot of fans, I'm sure, that grease the wheels on, hey, we got to make sure this guy gets his licensing so he can start brewing beer. Otherwise, we're not
Yeah.
going to have anything to drink. We're just going to be playing cornhole and drinking water.
Yeah, yeah. I forgot about that. Your initial question was asking me about the loan, and the loan is that it came. At least I was directed to the Community Development Business Grant by the West Business Development Center. They directed me that way. So
Yeah.
that's how I don't know.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah, there's lots of loans like out there for this. For our city, I'm sure other ones are. I'm sure other cities have the same kind of thing. So if you're starting a business, I would seek that out, seek those kinds of things out.
Well, it sounds like you found out afterwards that just the thing you were trying to do was really aligned with what the city was trying to create, fortunately.
Yes, I did. I did find that out.
Otherwise, there may have been some more headaches than the canisters that were locked in Oakland's port.
Right.
Um, Having gone through that process, Patrick, and run out of money and had to negotiate with everyone, even to get to not even the finish line, but the starting line
Right.
of trying to get this business off the ground, like what's the biggest thing if you could go back that you would have done differently?
That's a good question. I don't mean to disparage another company, but this it did happen where this company that I bought the tanks from, Brewbelt, was they were not straightforward with their what they said they would do. I wouldn't have gone with that company. I could have not gone through all the problems that I had with that equipment, it would have made things a lot easier. So that would be one thing I would change. And I do want to say that the equipment itself is excellent. I love the system now that it's in place. So I'm not saying that it's a completely bad company, but it was they really made it hard on me. So I would have done that a little differently. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, everything that I wrote in the business plan has come true, and it's working. So I don't know that I would change much else other than that.
What most surprised you? I mean, obviously, when you're creating a business plan, when you're putting together these spreadsheets, you're making a bunch of assumptions about what you think is going to be true. Sometimes it's true in the negative sense, and sometimes it's true in the positive sense. But what most surprised you, either on the positive or the negative?
Well, I was wrong about the revenue. I had the revenue calculator, and the spreadsheet itself was fine, but I overestimated how much revenue how many people would come in the door. And so that was another sort of panic time for me because we did a huge, we opened the doors. We surprisingly opened the doors the day before we said we'd open. We did $5,000 in beer sales in about 5 hours. It was crazy. The place was just throbbing with people. And then the next day we opened, we did 7,000. And so we're rolling in dough. I'm thinking everything's great. And then a week or so into it, Monday comes along and no one comes in. And then Tuesday, it's really slow. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to pay these bills back? So I was wrong about that. And that surprised me. And then the other thing I was wrong about was we were going into the winter, and I was really nervous about that. But then the locals really came through, and the locals ended up supporting the company through the winter. So I was wrong about that. I really thought the revenue would completely drop off in the winter, and it didn't. It was pretty steady. So I wasn't that far off my total numbers as far as what the revenue to expect, but I was off about the seasonality of it and what the locals brought. And then I also learned a lot about you know what it takes to bring people in, and what we learned was music is really important. We do music Friday. You have to do things. We have trivia night now. We have open mic night now. We have music Friday night. We have music Saturday. We have acoustic series on Wednesday, and all those things bring people in, and then you use social media to really push that. That was something hadn't really thought about before opening, and it was something we learned on the fly, and it's really helped. It's really bringing in customers.
Yeah, let's talk about that evolution a little bit because you're a guy who came from an operational background. Like you knew all the back end operational things to do to run a brewery.
Uh,
And it sounds like marketing was kind of the secondary piece. This was your field of dreams. Like I'm going to build it and
right,
all these people are going to come. And it actually
right,
happened the first 2 days when you had the newness of this new thing in
right.
town. And then all of a sudden it disappeared. Then what did you do? Like what were the first steps you took to say, "Oh man, I need to focus on marketing. How am I going to put some butts in the seats?"
Well, at first I panicked, worried and panicked, and uh, you know, um, I remember one particular day I was really, really dismayed, and I called my brother-in-law and I was talking to him, and he was not really happy about it either. And then that day, a friend of mine who's a local rock star guy here that I've known for 30 years, we had him come in and play. And I'll be damned if the place didn't fill right back up again. And I just went, okay, I get it. We need to do music here. And then as soon as we started doing that, we started karaoke. We got this karaoke on Friday, and oh my gosh! Once again, the play it just was just slammed. We did like $4,000 the first night we did that. So we do that. We started doing that every other Friday, and it's always a moneymaker. Um, uh, I was approached by the Mendocino Jazz Society, Mendocino Coast Jazz Society, and they wanted to come in every Monday and do swing dance. They wanted to play for free. They wouldn't charge me anything. That's every Monday, and every Monday is really good because of that. So I kind of lost the initial question you asked me, but it was a lot of just sort of, oh, I remember. Yeah, so you're right. I'm not a marketing guy, but I'm learning, and I think I do have a lot of inherent business skills that are in there that they're coming out now. I really see how this works now. I didn't before, and as I'm going along, I'm learning, and yeah, like I said, I'm becoming a businessman, or I am one now. I can officially
Yeah,
say.
you're official, man.
Yeah.
You've been fighting it for 30 years, but now you're there. Um, Tell us a little bit about what you've learned about yourself in this process. I mean, it sounds like this business has really stretched you. For 30 years, you've been doing stuff that you kind of knew how to do.
Yeah.
So, what's changed for you personally?
I mean, everything. My entire life is completely different than it was before. I raised my wife and I raised three daughters. The last one left the home 2019. I started this project 2021, so it's sort of an empty nest thing. But yeah, I mean, I'm a completely different person now. I'm a changed person now, and I think I have more confidence in myself now. I mean, I'm a tall guy. I used to slouch. I don't slouch anymore. I stand up tall, and I feel pretty good about, and not in a cocky way, but in a way that I just feel like, I can do this. I've done this. I've accomplished this, and things are going well. I have a lot more confidence in myself than I did before.
It's interesting. Most people would say, like, you need to develop the confidence before you take this big leap into
Yeah.
becoming a business owner. It kind of feels like your confidence has come from being on the water in your river raft and surviving.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. It really is like that. You kind of got to just go for it. You got to jump in. And I was very naive before I started this. I didn't know a lot of things. And when I was in the middle of, I quit my job in August of 2022, and I didn't get another paycheck for a year and a half. So you start to, I'm not a rich person either. So, my wife and I were like, the savings account was starting to go away. And I did feel like it felt like I was holding up this huge weight. And I had to hold it up, and I had to keep holding it up. I couldn't put it down. There was no way to go back. I couldn't drop it there. You had to just keep going, keep going. And, it does it changes you, and once you accomplish it.
How did you get through it?
A lot of prayer. I'm religious. I'm a Christian, and I prayed every day, and I really do believe that God was directing me and guiding me and blessing me and all this whole thing. I was doing all the work, but He was also, giving me the help, and I honestly believe that.
Have all the daughters had a chance to come back home and go visit the tap room and
Yeah, no. As a matter of
see
fact,
what Dad has built?
once again, great question. My wife works with me. My middle daughter is the general manager. She'd never done it before either, so she's learning on the fly. My youngest daughter's working for us. I had my stepson working for us for a while there. It's a family thing, and that's great that I can, that we can all be together. We see each other much more. My wife can't tell me that I'm at work all the time because she's there too. So that's been a wonderful thing. And to run your own business, that's one of the benefits you can do. Is you can have nepotism,
Yeah.
your family all around you, and not only family but friends and people that you trust. Once again, I'm surrounding myself with people that I trust.
I'm curious with this business that's sort of central to the Fort Bragg community. Has it changed your relationship to the local community in any way?
Oh yeah, it's. I mean, I'm a celebrity. I'm a local celebrity. I wear my tall guy stuff everywhere. I walk into Safeway. Hey, there's the tall guy, and I can't walk across the. If there's people in my establishment, I can't walk across. I can't get 2 feet without someone stopping me and wanting to talk to me. And I love it. It gets a little bit hard if I want to just come off and sit down and have a beer and look at my phone. It's probably not going to happen. I'm a local celebrity now, and yeah, and there's good and bad with that.
Yeah,
Mostly good.
so it's Tall Guy Brewing. How tall are you, Patrick?
I'm 6'8".
6'8".
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, so it makes sense. I'm
yeah.
glad you're sitting down.
And I'm easy to recognize. So when I walk out, hey, you're the tall guy. I get that question I get that question constantly.
And when you're going around town, are you always wearing branded swag?
I tend to because I wear them to work, all the time.
Yeah.
And then I get off work and I go to Safeway, and yeah, I tend to have the shirt and the hat on a lot. So I'm very recognizable.
So, Patrick, you're a few years into this. Sounds like things are going well. You're paying down the debt. You're getting to the point where you've got a paycheck now coming in. How are you thinking about the future? I mean, the tap room's an interesting idea. It sounds like there's other ways you could go, right? You could keep it like it is and operate it more lifestyle. You could open other tap rooms. You could maybe distribute beer. Like, how are you thinking about where to
Yeah.
go next?
Yeah, I still, we still, I owe my brother 150 grand, and so I want to keep paying that down. I really feel like once I get the debt paid down, I just, I don't, I want to keep this simple. I've always said that. I want to keep it simple. You never say never, but I really don't want to do any canning or bottling. I might do some draft beer at some point in the future when I get some help. But I just really want to keep working on the tap room and working on ways of getting people to come in. Maybe a pilot, like another. Mendocino is another tourist town 9 miles south of Fort Bragg that's very well known. We're in Mendocino County. It's a little Victorian village on the ocean. We could open a tap room there, and I could ship my tanks. I could do something like that. But right now I just want to continue to plug away here. We're a thriving business. We're making money every day. So I think once I get all my completely pay my bills off, I could be making plenty of money. It's a very profitable thing. So
Yeah.
I want to keep it simple, I guess, is the answer to your question.
Yeah.
I don't plan on doing too much more.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you put a lot of effort and energy in that first year and a half to get this thing to the place where it needed to be. So you probably deserve a little bit of a, coasting period.
I know you're supposed to keep expanding, keep doing stuff. I don't know. I don't know. I don't really know why. I mean, if you have something that works and it's generating a substantial income, I don't see any reason to try to make it bigger or bolder or broader or anything like that. But maybe after I retire, someone else can buy it and they can do that.
I think that's beautiful, Patrick. I think there's a reason we named this podcast Create the Life You Want.
All
And
right.
it's in recognition that regardless of what you're supposed to do, and I don't know who says that you're supposed to do it, the whole point that most people are pursuing when they start a business is some level of freedom, right? And they may think they're pursuing financial freedom, but they're often pursuing some level of personal freedom. And you can make trade-offs if you grow too fast on that, where you give up some of that personal freedom that may not be worth it when you think
Right.
about what you really want for your life. So,
Yeah, I'm 58 now. So, I'm up there as far as you look at 20 years down the road, I'm not going to be doing this anymore. So, if I was in my 20s or 30s, yeah, maybe bigger plans of expansion, but, that's not where I am in my life.
yeah. How are you thinking about how much time you got left for the business?
Maybe 10 years down the road, I'll start looking at phasing out of that aspect of it. I'll
Yeah.
probably always own it. I'll probably always be the CEO, and until I can't anymore, and then I'll probably just pass that on to one of my kids.
Well, Patrick, I'm curious, you've been through this journey for several years now. If someone were to come and ask you, hey, man, you operate this successful business. I'm really inspired by it. I want to be a business owner. What advice would you give me?
Yeah, I would just say, write a business plan. That's the best place to start because, writing a business plan is effective for getting stockholders and getting loans and banks and stuff like that. But it's also good for just what do you really want to do and how is this going to work? And it makes you get creative in the way you approach, the business that you're going to open. So first of all, sit down, write down your thoughts. Why would it work? Why will the numbers be what they are? What are you going to sell? How many are you going to sell? What's it going to cost to produce it? I mean, get all those numbers and get all that information and written down and, and spend some time doing it. And then if it makes sense after you're done, then you're probably ready to go, or but you got to write it down. You have to have a plan. Business plan is the first place to start.
Yeah. What would you have missed if you hadn't spent that time creating the plan and the
Yeah,
financial model?
exactly. I would have been a complete failure. I mean, there's just things like I do things differently. Um, like I don't keg beer. Kegs are 15 gallons. They weigh 160 pounds. You got to buy them. You got to clean them. You got to move them around. You got to tap them and untap them. But I purchased a fleet of 200 gallon serving tank. Well, they're pressure tanks from the fruit industry, and I converted them into brewing tanks with local welder here. And that's a really easy. It's so simple to do it that way. It's so cheap and simple and makes so much sense. And and I came across that while I was sort of doing my business plan. And so little things like that come up as you're thinking through
Yeah.
the process. And if I hadn't done that, if I just jumped into this, I probably would have bought a bunch of. It just would have been. You got to have a map. It's like saying how you go to Europe and without a map and without internet or anything to try to get around town. You need to have a roadmap of what you're going to do, and you have to create the roadmap.
Yeah. So when you're working on the business plan and you're coming up on some questions about how you're going to deliver this beer, and all of a sudden you realize, I don't want to have 500 kegs sitting in the back room that I've got to move around. And this
Right.
is what led you to the innovation around the serving tanks.
Yeah, that was just one idea. That's just one example of what you learn when you go through the process of writing a business plan. But yeah, there's I don't want to go into the detail of why that's so much
Yeah.
better, but it just makes the process so much easier. And it was something that I came up across when I was sitting at my desk. How am I going to do this? And it's really worked out.
Yeah. Is there anything you learned when you were putting together that financial model, the revenue model?
I was really, I was pretty proud of myself because the way I did it, I told you there's what 5 different things that I, variables that would change. And when I read the How to Start a Brewery book, they described how to determine the revenue, and they did it exactly the same way, the same exact variables they suggested looking at and manipulating. I was like, oh, I think I'm on it. I must be onto something if I already did what they're suggesting that I do. So yeah, I learned that. There's just a lot of things that I had to learn through that. I mean, maybe go off on a tangent, but taxes and government and permits and all those things are all things that I had to sort of figure out as I went along as well.
Anything you want to share with the audience, Patrick, about how you've used the business to start to create the life that you want?
It's funny because right now and we're in the process of selling our house today. We have our first showing here in a few hours, and I'm selling the house because I want to buy another building, same street as my brewery's on. And I did that. We're doing that because I want to live there. I want to live. It was an apartment above it. I want to live above it, and I want to live because I'm always there, And I
Yeah.
don't want to come back. This is I'm a few minutes away, but I want to live there. So we're changing our entire life to adapt to this business. And yeah, I mean, it's just become such a it is my life now, and so I want to be closer to it. So it's just something we're doing right now that'll help accomplish that.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, I really appreciate you taking the time today. It was fun to hear about your story. It's not unusual to hear a story of an entrepreneur's dream who almost dashed on the rocks before it got started, but love the scrappiness that you've been able to use to put together something that's unique. Because it's not just, hey, you're creating another product out there, you're creating a different experience in the community that's got you more engaged. You're now a celebrity at the grocery store, so congratulations. You're officially a B-lister in Fort Bragg.
Thank you.
So I appreciate you taking the time today, Patrick. Thanks so much.
Hey, no problem. I'm glad to do it, and hopefully this helps others to accomplish their dreams. Feel free to reach out and talk to me. Anyone that's listening and for more advice, I'd be happy to give it to you.
Yeah, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, where would they find Big Tall Brewing and the 6'8"
Uh,
gentleman
Tall
known
Guy
as
Brewing.
Patrick?
Yeah, Tall Guy Brewing. Well, you can Google Tall Guy Brewing and you'd find us. We're on Instagram. Um, you know, it's pretty easy to find us if you just do a little web search for Tall Guy Brewing. Fort Bragg, California.
All right. Thanks again, Patrick. Thanks for listening to the Create the Life You Want podcast. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to future episodes by clicking the subscribe button, you know where. If you're an aspiring business owner, you may also want to subscribe to the Create the Life You Want newsletter for more inspiration and tips delivered to your inbox every week. You can find the link to that in the show notes, as well as on my personal website, jeremyames.com. If you've already decided you want to start or buy a business, consider exploring your financing options by heading to our sponsor's website at www.guidantfinancial.com. That's GUIDANT financial.com. See you in the next episode.